All right, hello. Microphone. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about specifics of execution because you can go online and read the guidelines that are on Facebook's developer site or really anywhere. I really want to spend more time talking about the fundamentals of social design, why we're even sitting in this room, why we even do this in the first place, what it means, because so often a lot of talks that I see, a lot of things that I read don't really get into the deep fundamental concepts. And there's a lot of different kinds of design out there. There's product design, social design, interaction design, UI design, user experience design. And every time you hear something about any of them, they always seem to neglect the one thing they all really have in common, which is, well, it's design. So a really good friend and mentor of mine defined this for me a couple of years ago, and I was just sort of getting a handle on what this is, as a solution to a problem that the environment presents. And I really like this definition because it's so natural. No matter where you go or what you do, you're always in some kind of environment. And that environment creates not only the problems that need to be solved, but also the constraints. So that means that design is always tied to context. So when we talk about social design, we're also talking about people and their relationships with each other. And so it makes sense to talk about the environment as it really exists in the real world. So what is that environment? It's a hazardous place. There's a lot of storms and natural disasters. There are hostile environments that make it difficult to find food, to find water. Our constant need is continuing to survive. We've got predators out there that are trying to eat you, and diseases that are trying to eat you, that are trying to eat you from the inside. I don't even know what this is, but it sounds scary. And so you're sitting here in this environment trying to survive, and it's throwing all this stuff at you. You've got to figure out a way to stabilize it somehow and continue to exist. So we do that through a process of adaptation. Obviously, the whole reason why we're sitting in this room right now is because this process worked out pretty well. So that's cool. There's two ways we can adapt. Number one is we can try to stabilize the environment. So like a beaver building a dam, which lets it protect itself from the elements and also have access to food in the tougher months. And the way that we have developed our agricultural skill to actually control the way that we create food and manage it, which is amazing. The other thing we can do is stabilize ourselves, not consciously, of course, but through a process of evolution, like this lizard that lives in the deserts of Australia where it rains maybe twice a year, and as such has developed these horns that actually funnel the rainwater into its mouth. It looks totally weird, but it doesn't matter what you think because it's still alive today, so it solves the problem. The anglerfish in the deep, dark parts of the ocean has developed bioluminescence to see the world around it and look for predators and prey. Not the kind of fish you want on your bedroom pillow. Doesn't matter what you think. It solves the problem. It's still alive today. So this process of adaptation has actually evolved us into working together as communities. It's by far the most valuable way that we've adapted to the environment, to understand that we can work together, we can cooperate, and actually as a group we can be far more successful in survival than individually. It makes so much sense in the wild because if you're facing a predator, oh, well, that's what community is, yeah. Group whose members share common values and principles we can look to for help. In Latin, it actually is common unity, so it's a perfect word. But in the wild, it's perfect because you can warn each other of impending danger that's lurking in the distance, and as a group, you can be more formidable to a potential predator than you are individually. You can work together to take down larger prey and have more food for yourself. You can huddle together in the winter months, or if you're afraid of Morgan Freeman. And this has also actually changed our own biology so that we need this connection. For the sake of our own survival, we have to be connected. There's no reason why meerkats need to hug each other. That's not helping food. But they do. So the whole reason why this community works in the first place is because of this really basic notion of trust that sort of separates the community from the rest of the environment. And trust is really nothing more than basically an inherent recognition of sameness and stability in someone or something else. And when I say that, what I mean is sameness in that you recognize that this is just like you, and also it's stable. It's not going anywhere. You can rely on it. It's extremely important. It underlines everything about how we operate as a society. So because this is such a powerful factor, and it has been built in biologically, and because we are able to work together as a community, we've actually been able to reconstruct the environment around us so that it is no longer the same threat as it used to be. In fact, our community now is pretty much our environment. We don't really live in, grassy knolls and harsh deserts. Well, unless you live in LA. Everything we do, everything we come in contact with has been, in some part, sort of man-made. But that has led to one other interesting and unfortunate side effect, which is that because our own survival depends on our connection to this community, whenever we are not connected, we have a sense of loneliness. And nobody knows this better than me. Oh, no, just kidding. The whole thing with loneliness is simply this, that you grow up and you're just like everybody else in a lot of ways, a lot of fundamental ways, and yet you continue to feel different. You have your own feelings, you have your own thoughts, you have your own hopes, your own fears, and you struggle with this conflict because as much as you want to be connected to everybody else, you still feel a little bit different, and you worry that that difference is going to separate you from getting your fundamental needs met. Good quote. We're all so much together, yet we're all dying of loneliness. So that's a problem. One way to solve this problem, however, is to develop an identity, which is basically a stable understanding of and trust in oneself. Because no matter how chaotic the world around you gets, and now however many times you feel disconnected, if you have a trust in yourself, if you understand who you are, it doesn't matter because you're not going anywhere. You have yourself. So our whole goal at the moment is to really build up a sense of who we are because that's all we really have guaranteed. So the environment is, of course, posing a problem. How do we figure out how to form this identity from the world around us that's similar to us? We go through a process of adaptation. Again, 2 steps. One, we can stabilize the environment. So like birds and other animals collect things. They surround themselves with things that they feel comfortable with. Sometimes if you have dogs, you know that they take your toys or your shoes. When I was a little kid, I collected miniature animals in a town. We all do this. We all do this. It's part of our fundamental chemistry. We collect Beanie Babies, right? Everybody does this, right? Okay, this is good. We collect movies, maybe, or we watch really good films. We have sets of music that we like. Obviously, there's a lot of music out there. The kind of music that's in your collection says something about who you are, makes you feel comfortable. It's a reflection of who you are. We also collect people. We collect friends, people who mirror us in some way, people who care about us, who we care about. Again, it's all based on this notion of trust, inherent recognition of sameness and stability in something or someone else. That's what we do. The other thing we can do, of course, is try to stabilize ourselves. You can do yoga, you can work out, you can practice meditation, you can learn stuff, you can teach yourself knowledge and skill, you can perform, you can create things, all of these different ways for you to just make tangible the things in your mind that you want to be real. Great tactics. But the problem is that the world in which we live is no longer this sort of natural environment where everything is sort of uncertain. For most people, it looks more like this. We have been able to create an environment where we can get pretty much a lot of our basic needs met generally, and it's constantly being surrounded by people. So instead of our family structure like the meerkats, we actually live in towns and cities with thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And if you're hungry, you don't have to just go farm stuff. You can go to the store and get 47 varieties of cereal and 20 brands of chocolate and 8 different kinds of cat litter. If you want to go learn something and how to find a book on how to do something, you go to the library, but there's thousands of books that are written by thousands of people. You want to go buy a piece of clothing for yourself to keep warm. Well, there's 8 different floors of clothing and different styles, and that's judged by society as well. So you better make sure you pick out the right clothing for this season. You want to find some friends? Well, same thing. There's a lot of people out there. It's very difficult to find the right people. There's a lot of problems. Sorry. This makes me nervous just thinking about it. The fact is that we really do not change as quickly as we can change the environment. 500 years ago, the world was not this complicated, and yet 500 years is nothing in the blip of our evolution. It took us millions of years to evolve into communities in the first place. 500 years? Come on. So obviously we have a big problem right now. We're trying to figure out how to get what we need from the environment, but the environment is so much more complex now than it used to be. So the good news is that everybody has this problem. It's not just you. Everybody's trying to solve this problem of how to get their needs met in this sort of great community society. And the way we do this is by interacting with each other through this notion of conversation. When we talk to each other, we learn not only what they have to say, but also what we want to say as well. And conversation is simply the exchange of thoughts and ideas and information and stories. It's how we share who we are, how we receive information back, and that synergy between the two forms the bond that we so desperately crave. So social design is basically just the product strategy that encourages and facilitates conversation for the sake of your own identity. Now, you may think that it's something new because everyone and their mother is talking about their social media strategy now, and their Facebook pages and this and that. But we've been doing social design for a very long time, from the early days of the Egyptian tablets to the printing press and the radio and the TV and the phonograph and the telegraph and the internet and the cell phones. We've been doing it for a long time. But we particularly accelerated in the internet field, which is, of course, why we're here today talking about social product design on the internet. It's not just Facebook, even though they kind of led the revolution, but there's obviously dozens of companies that are popping up left and right that are doing stuff with social. It's obviously working in some regard. So, well, why is that? Well, the internet is actually pretty well designed when you think about it. It's optimized both for immediate and delayed. You can read stuff now, but you can also read it later. It's both visual and audio at the same time. You can do person-to-person individual relationships, but also you can broadcast to a lot of people. You can take it with you whenever you are, wherever you are. And it's universal. Everybody in the world has the same internet, unless you're China. We're working on that there, right? We're working on it. And yet, for the first 20 years or so of the internet, 10 years, this is what we got. These are the social products that we've designed. These are the forum systems that have plagued the internet. And they're still around today. There's thousands of them. For every one social site you see, Pinterest, Facebook, Quora, there's hundreds of these. And they're terrible. Number one, they're rooted in anonymity. They've got usernames, they've got avatars. We don't even know who these people are. We don't even know who you are. And if the whole point of social design is to be forming a sense of identity, and you don't even know who these people are, and you don't even know who you are, then what's the point, really? Secondly, the conversational tools are terrible. All the data on these things are totally unstructured. The content is buried. There's a very distracting presentation. It's very information heavy. The whole system is very passive. You have to go to the site every time to check and see what's new. And the whole interaction is entirely cumbersome and slow. It's not very good at all. But what's funny is that it's actually very much like the real world. That's how the real world operates. I mean, when you think about it. And yet it's rooted in something that's fundamentally not real world at all. That's a little bit weird. And you know, the reason for that is because technology traditionally attempts to mimic the physical world, right? You live in an environment where it's physical 3D, you learn about it for millions of years, then you develop a digital system that's only 2D and it changes rapidly. I think the best thing to do is to build products that look like something you've seen before. That's Apple's strategy, that's why it's done so well. But conversation, the real world, is kind of limiting. So we can actually change it and develop a new kind of environment that is much more suited for what our needs are. And of course, if we're going to do that, we need to figure out what those needs are, really. Charles Eames has this great quote from the 50s, 60s. Recognizing the need is the primary condition for design. Now, we've already talked about some of the needs, but don't take my word from it. Let's take psychology. Who remembers this from intro psych? Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our physiological needs of food and sleep and water, and reproduction. I tell that to the girls at the bar. Safety. Also, we don't want to get eaten or killed. Belonging, community, right? Self-esteem, self-actualization. I mean, this could easily be relabeled based on sort of what I've said before. And social design is focusing on these two areas here, the relationship between the identity and the community. And that's sort of where we're involved in. So these are really our needs, self-esteem and belonging. And of course, self-esteem comes from belonging. So really what we're talking about is optimizing for connection. That is what social design does. If you're going to build social products, you've got to optimize for connection. Which is great because I think all social products now are really focused on this idea of the social graph, which is really nothing complicated. It's just the idea that, hey, there are a bunch of things, places, people, ideas, objects out there in the world, and we want to make sure that you're all connected to them. So we map out this graph, and then we put all these edges together. On a 4x3 slide, this looks great. The edges all have labels. So I worked at Facebook, I lived in San Francisco, I went to Penn, I'm friends with Adam, Adam's friends with Drew, Drew likes Dexter, I like Boston, etc. But the edges are what tell the story about how the connections form and don't form. So the edges are extremely important as long as we have the nodes on which to connect. So also interestingly, from the 50s, Charles Eames has this other quote that eventually everything connects, people, ideas, objects. The connections are what give the product its life. And that was before the internet. But it's the same principle that holds true now. Optimizing for connection. Well, what happens when you actually have everything connect? You can do some pretty cool things. I've worked on a number of social products over the last couple of years, and it's not really as complicated as it seems. Airbnb, for example, you can show how you're related to the host when you're looking for a place to stay. It takes the anonymity out of the equation. You're much more likely to trust this now because you know somebody who's related to it. That's great. You look on IDEO for music to listen to, and it tells you which music your friends have listened to. Again, it takes the anonymity out of the equation. Now you're more likely to trust it. Same thing, you're looking for a place to have lunch, and TownSquared tells you, where your friends have been and what they say as well. The other thing we do is ask people to share their experiences and their thoughts. And we don't hide it in a bunch of categorized rooms like we do in a form system. We just give it to you on a linear stream where you can sit there in your underwear all day Saturday and just scroll infinitely. It's called infinite scroll. Infinitely. And of course, lately, the big thing is now like these boards of showcasing objects, things of interest, places you've been to, products you want to buy, hairdos you like. It's an amazing number of girls who pin pictures of girls on Pinterest, isn't it? I'm just very curious. But again, it's not buried under categories or different hierarchies. It's just all right there in front of you in a time-ordered display, very natural. And also lately is this sort of focus on activity. You don't even have to create a node in the system. You just have to do something, and that becomes something of interest now. I repinned a pin. I listened to a song. I watched a movie. I liked somebody's status. This is great. And of course, every time these new nodes are formed, every time these new connections are formed, there's always feedback actions so that you can engage as well. You can form more connections. You can like things. You can comment on them. You can review stuff. You can tag people in photos. You can repin pins. And it's always in your face, trying to get you to engage, because every time you engage, you're kept in the loop when new stuff happens later. You always get notifications. That red badge has taken over everybody's life. Foursquare RDO, somebody liked your post, somebody responded to your playlist, somebody tagged you in a photo, added you to a group, responded to your comment. You're constantly kept connected. The system is very active about doing that. And so these new world elements, while they're sort of new and exciting and different, they're still based in these fundamental human needs. I mean, the data is structured, we have content very discoverable, everything's very clean and focused, it's very people-centric, the system is active in getting you involved, and the whole thing is very fast and easy, allowing you to interact with more people than you could possibly interact with in the real world. But it's still fundamentally rooted in trust. Don't forget that part. And the reason why this works, of course, is because conversation is inherently a back and forth of two parties, the identity and the community. So on one hand, you are learning from the community, you're hearing the recommendations, their feedback, their experiences, their stories, their activity, and at the same time you're being prompted to share your own. And so what happens is that the more there is to learn, the more there is to share, and the more there is to share, the more there is to learn. And this creates a virtuous cycle of sharing that grows exponentially. Positive feedback loop is another word. But ultimately, the value of social is really not anything material at all. Okay, we can build whatever products we want to, but the ultimate goal is simply just to connect the gaps so that there is no gap between identity and community. We want to feel that deep connection between ourselves and other people and the world around us. Because when we do that, we realize that this idea of loneliness that we have is really just in our heads. We're all lonely together. And in a great quote by Carl Sagan from Contact, the only thing that makes the emptiness more bearable is each other. Thank you.